going to show you some basic paper folding and sculpting techniques that you might want to use in your low relief paper sculpture. Many of these are started by cutting a row of paper. You can create folds by going back and forth. When you open it up, you have a zigzag that can either be glued on its side or it can be glued long ways. Strips of paper can then be cut down into smaller pieces and can be crumpled. Into tiny bits. And depending how wide your paper is, the larger the crumples will be. You can also take that long sheet of paper and using any sort of pen or pencil, you can twirl. And by simply just giving a little bit of a press, it'll retain that circular shape, which once again can be laid down on its edge or can be mounted on one side to leave the curl up. You can also pull it open to make some larger circles. If you have several long pieces, you can create a woven pattern. So the vertical pieces in anything that's woven is called the warp, and the pieces that go left to right are called the weft. And you weave by going under one, over, and then under. And then the next weft or horizontal piece, you do the opposite, over, under, then over. And you would bring these closer together. And you would continue with your remaining wefts. If you cut out a circular shape, and then cut a line up to the center, you can fold it over and create this dome-like structure. Put a little glue on the one side, fold it over and hold it. A lot of times when gluing, you just need a little patience. You can come back and you can trim off any excess there might be. And when it's dry, you can either glue it down on the one side, and you could stack a whole bunch of these, or you could apply glue to the bottom edge and glue it as a cone. You can also use larger pieces and cut folds in them. So if I took a large square, folded it on its side once, I can make cuts down that folded edge diagonally, leaving some spaces. When I open this back up, I can push back on those folds. I could then come over, fold the paper again, and I can either go in the same direction with my diagonals, making it so it's the same scale, pulling back, or I could go in the opposite direction and have them alternate which way the paper gets folded. I also try for something a little bit more complex, where I cut triangles, or at least the tops of triangles. When I open this up, I will have shapes to pull back from the side. You could also have them be curved, they don't have to be straight. This creates a sort of spiky, jagged texture. You can create fringes by taking a piece of paper and cutting upwards halfway, keeping your cuts parallel. And then you could take these and bend them up, or you can roll them. To create a fringe, if you have more than one, you can stack them, starting with the base first, and then moving upwards and stacking on top. You have a pin in your supply bag, so you can also take a piece of paper that's pre-cut into the shape that you want it to be on your final piece, and by very carefully poking upwards and making sure that you're pulling it through, you're going to create these holes, which in turn is going to create raised bumps of the paper from where it's pushed the opening, and it will create a small speckled pattern. You can also cut out shapes of pieces, and when you glue them down, glue the one point, but then leave the top. And then you can stack. So I'm folding down that one side, that's where the glue is going to go. And it can be any shape that you do this with. And you always want to start with what's on the bottom and build upwards. So if you know you want to do something like scales or have it look more like fur, you want to start with the bottom side and then be stacking upwards and on top. Finally, if you have a cup of water in a plastic cup and your glue bottle, you can also take pieces of paper and you can dip it into the water and kind of soak it and it's going to absorb the water and it's going to make it more malleable. And then you can take some of the Elmer's glue and you can smear it on the wet paper and you're going to mold it. It's very simple to crumpling the paper, but because it's wet and because there's glue all over it, it's going to hold its shape. It's going to be a little bit softer. So instead of having prickly edges, you can actually mold it more into spheres. And then you can put a little tiny dot glue where you want it and place it down on the paper. Okay, this is going to take a little bit longer to dry because it's wet. It'll probably take about a day and a half to dry, and you want to make sure that when you do this it's not sopping wet because it'll get all over the paper.